All right, so we're diving deep today. And, you want to sound more natural in English?
Absolutely.
So you've been digging through all your sources.
Yeah.
It's like cracking a code.
It is.
Are you ready to ditch the textbook and sound more like a native speaker?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things is that it's not just about perfect grammar.
Right.
It's how you use your voice, how you use intonation, and even those little words we try to avoid.
Okay, so you're telling me there's hope for those of us who still, trip up on grammar rules sometimes?
Definitely. And I think one of the most surprising things we found in all the research is that even native speakers don't always speak in perfect sentences.
Go
They use filler words all the time, like, and
Wait, seriously, I thought those were bad habits we were supposed to break.
it's not about eliminating them completely.
Right.
It's like salt in a recipe, a pinch, can enhance the flavor, but too much ruins the dish.
Okay.
These words actually serve a purpose in natural conversation. They give us time to think, they soften our statements, and they actually help us match the rhythm and flow of native speech.
So it's not about being like a robot, speaking perfectly.
Right.
It's about finding that sweet spot where our speech feels natural and engaging.
Exactly. It's about sounding more human, more relatable.
Okay.
So for instance, if you're thinking about an answer, try using well, or let me see, to buy yourself some time, but avoid overusing like, especially at the beginning of sentences.
This is blowing my mind.
Mhm.
So how do we actually practice using fillers effectively? I don't want to sound like I'm just throwing them in randomly.
Start small.
Okay.
Practice with simple sentences, adding in or well, where you might naturally pause.
Mm-hmm.
Then try answering questions off the cuff, allowing yourself to use those fillers to keep the conversation moving while you think.
So giving ourselves permission to pause, even if it means using a filler word.
Exactly. And as you practice, you'll develop a better sense of which fillers sound natural in different situations and how to use them sparingly for maximum impact.
Okay, so fillers are in moderation.
Yes.
But what about intonation? I'm seeing that pop up a lot in these sources, and honestly, it's not something I've given much thought to.
Intonation is absolutely key to sounding natural and fluent.
Okay.
Think of your voice like a musical instrument.
Okay.
You wouldn't play a happy tune on a piano using only low, somber notes, right?
Right.
The same goes for English.
Okay.
It's not just the words you say, but how you say them.
So you're saying that the way our voice rises and falls can actually change the meaning of what we're saying.
Absolutely. Take a simple phrase like, "It's a beautiful day."
Okay.
Try saying it with a flat tone.
Okay.
And now say it again, letting your voice rise on beautiful and fall gently on day.
It's a beautiful day.
Hear the difference. That's the magic of intonation.
Whoa. Okay, you're telling me I've been missing out on this secret weapon all along. I got to start paying more attention to how I'm using my voice.
And the best way to master intonation is to listen to native speakers.
Okay.
Pay attention to how their voices rise and fall in different situations, how they use emphasis to convey emotion, and don't be afraid to mimic what you hear.
So you're saying interviews are great for this. You can really hear the nuances in how people are speaking.
Exactly.
Like a little masterclass in intonation.
Exactly. And speaking of mimicking, there's another technique native speakers use that can really enhance your fluency.
Okay.
It's called chunking.
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 Okay, tell me more, because I'm all about adding new techniques to my fluency arsenal.
It's about how native speakers group words together into meaningful units.
Oh.
These are called thought groups.
Okay.
Like instead of saying, "I am going to the store" in a robotic way,
Right.
it becomes, "I am going to the store."
Right.
Slight pauses between those chunks.
So it's almost like we're adding punctuation to our speech with those pauses and changes in intonation.
Precisely.
Okay.
And mastering this can make a huge difference in sounding more fluent and natural.
Okay.
Instead of getting hung up on every single word you're thinking in phrases just like native speakers do.
Okay, so we've got fillers, intonation, and now chunking.
Yes.
It's like we're piecing together a puzzle to unlock that native speaker con.
Yeah.
This is way more fun than just memorizing grammar rules.
And we're just getting started. There are even more layers to this puzzle that we'll uncover in the next part of our deep dive. All right, so let's unlock another level of natural English. Remember, we're trying to crack the code of how native speakers actually talk.
I'm all about those insider secrets, so what's next on our mission?
This one might seem small, but it can make a big difference.
Okay.
Contractions.
Contractions.
Those little shortened forms we use all the time, like, can't.
Yeah.
And so on.
So instead of saying, I am going, it's more natural to say I'm going.
Right.
But I feel like I already do that sometimes.
That's great. You're probably already using some contractions without even realizing it.
Okay.
But consciously incorporating them more often can make your speech sound much smoother and less formal.
Okay.
Think about it. Avoiding contractions is like wearing a tuxedo to a backyard barbecue.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I get that. Like showing up in a fancy gown to a pizza party.
Exactly.
That's not the vibe.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, learners often know contractions in theory,
Right.
but they hesitate to use them when speaking.
Yeah.
It's about making those shortcuts automatic, like second nature.
Okay, so any tips for like actually making those a habit? I want them to just roll off my tongue, effortlessly.
Flashcards can be super helpful here.
Okay.
Write the full form on one side and the contraction on the other.
Okay.
Practice till it feels natural. Also, try role-playing everyday situations.
Okay.
Imagine yourself ordering a coffee. I'll have a latte, please.
I'll have a latte, please. Oh, yeah. That does sound way more natural than I will have a latte, please.
Right.
I'm sold.
And once you're comfortable with the basics, you can even delve into some of those more informal reductions like gonna for going to or
yeah.
wanna for want to. It's like the next level of sounding like a native speaker.
Insider knowledge. I'm taking notes. All right.
Oh,
So we cracked the code on fillers. We've cracked the code on intonation.
yes.
We cracked the code on chunking. And now we're cracking the code on contractions.
Yes.
What else makes native speakers sound so effortless?
Well, remember those thought groups we talked about?
Mm-hmm.
Chunking is super important, but it's also about shifting your mindset away from thinking word by word
Okay.
and embracing those natural groupings.
So like instead of painstakingly constructing each sentence in my head, I should just try to like think in those flowing chunks.
Precisely. Take a sentence like, I think I'm going to take a break for a few days.
Okay.
A native speaker wouldn't think about each of those words separately. It would be more like, I think I'm going to take a break for a few days.
All right.
Each chunk has its own mini melody thanks to intonation.
It's like we're composing music with our words.
Yeah.
I love how it all connects. So we've tackled those tricky contractions. What about phrasal verbs?
Ah, yes, phrasal verbs. They can be a bit slippery, but they're essential to sounding natural.
Yeah.
Think of them as verbs with a secret handshake. They combine with prepositions or adverbs
Okay.
to take on entirely new meanings.
Okay.
Give up, put off, look into. They pop up everywhere in everyday English.
Right. And they don't always translate literally, which can make them tough to grasp any strategies for mastering these sneaky verbs.
The key is to focus on the most common ones
Okay.
and start actively using them.
Oh.
Instead of saying, I will postpone the meeting, try, I'll put off the meeting. It's like swapping your formal suit for a casual jacket.
I'll put off the meeting.
Yeah.
It already feels more authentic. But what about idioms? They're like the slang of phrasal verbs.
Idioms are like the spice rack of the English language. They add color, personality, that touch of insider flair.
Okay.
Think of expressions like spill the beans
Okay.
or kick the bucket.
Those are definitely not about beans or buckets.
Right.
How do we even begin to tackle those? It feels like learning a secret code.
The best approach is to learn them in context.
Okay.
When you encounter an idiom, don't just memorize the phrase.
Right.
Try to understand the situation in which it's used, and don't be afraid to try them out, even if it feels a bit awkward at first.
Okay, so we're back and ready to like uncover that final piece of the native speaker code. We've covered so much already.
And this last tip might be the most valuable tool in your fluency arsenal. It's all about self-reflection.
Self-reflection. Okay, I'm intrigued. What does that even mean in the context of like language learning?
It means taking the time to listen to yourself speak.
Okay.
Really analyze your own patterns and habits.
Okay.
It's like having a personal coach for your English.
So like recording myself, I have to admit the thought of listening to my own voice kind of makes me cringe a little.
I totally get it. It can feel awkward at first.
Yeah.
But trust me, it's one of the most powerful ways to pinpoint areas where you can improve. You might discover things you wouldn't even notice otherwise.
Okay, you've convinced me. So how do we approach this self-reflection thing? Like any specific exercises or techniques?
One simple but super effective exercise is to record yourself speaking a short sentence.
Okay.
It could be anything like, how's the weather today? Or what are your plans for the weekend?
Right.
Then listen back a few times, paying close attention to your intonation, your pace, the clarity of your words.
And what are we listening for? Like what should we be paying attention to?
First, notice your intonation. Does it sound natural?
Yeah.
Are you using rising and falling pitches to create that musicality we talked about? Then check your pace. Are you speaking too quickly, too slowly? Or are you chunking words together naturally? Finally, focus on clarity. Are you enunciating clearly, or are you mumbling any words or sounds?
That's a lot to consider. It's like holding a magnifying glass up to our own speech. I can
Oh.
see how that would be really insightful.
Exactly. And the great thing is you can do this anytime, anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Your phone is like a portable language lab.
Right.
Record yourself, listen back, and identify those little nuances you might want to tweak.
So once we've identified those areas, what's the next step? How do we actually use this to improve?
That's where the real magic happens.
Okay.
Once you know what to focus on, you can start practicing those specific elements.
Okay.
Maybe your intonation is a bit flat, so you can consciously work on adding more rises and falls. Or perhaps you tend to rush through certain sounds, so you can practice slowing down and enunciating more clearly.
It's like we're sculpting our speech, like refining those tiny details to sound more natural and fluent.
Exactly. And another powerful technique is to use recordings of native speakers as models. Choose a short audio clip, listen to it a few times, and try to imitate the speaker's intonation, rhythm, and pronunciation as closely as possible. It's like absorbing those native-like patterns through osmosis.
I'm totally adding this to my practice routine, but let's
Yeah.
be honest, sometimes, even with all these techniques, I still get nervous speaking English.
Yeah.
What about that fear of making mistakes?
You know, that's a common feeling, but remember, fluency isn't about perfection.
Right.
It's about communication and confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. When you're chatting with friends in your native language, do you analyze every sentence before you speak?
Of course not. It just flows naturally.
Exactly. And that's the feeling we want to cultivate when speaking English.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to make mistakes. They're part of the learning process.
Yeah.
The more you practice, the more comfortable and confident you'll become.
This has been like such an eye-opening deep dive.
It has.
We've gone from tiny filler words to the power of self-reflection. It feels like we've really unlocked those secrets to sounding more natural. Any final words of wisdom for our listener?
Remember, fluency is a journey, not a destination. It's about constantly learning, experimenting, and having fun with the language. So what's one thing you're going to try today to sound more like a native speaker? Share it in the comments below.
That's a great question for our listener to ponder. And while you're thinking about it, don't forget to like this episode, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future deep dives.
Until next time, happy practicing, and keep up the fantastic work on your English journey.